All right, guys. So now we're going to do a bit of a review for summer 2024, my final exam for the human resource management. So I'm taking up last term's final exam, probably about half the questions, so you get a good taste of it. I have to acknowledge, though, this one, we just did like more of the standard multiple choice questions. So I think we did like 60 or 70 standard multiple choice questions, nothing funky at the end. Usually my exams have like this little mini case and a couple questions related to that. That is not what we did last term. So we did not have that for last exam. In this year's class, in this year's exam, you do have that. So be prepared for it. Unfortunately, I don't have any of that style of questions to review for you. But I will review a bunch of the more standard multiple choice questions. Okay, so let's jump into it. So first off, we've covered 6 different chapters, 6 topics since the midterm. This is a non-cumulative exam. There's about 10 questions per chapter. So in this case, it would be like 60 questions. So we're going to go through, I don't know, we'll go through a bunch of these in order. We're going through all of these in series. Okay, so first we're going to start off with orientation and training. All right, so here's 2 questions. Again, what I do, here's the question, pause it, go through it, make sure you get the right answer, and then play it, and then you can see as I take up each of the answers, okay? So the first question, the first step in designing an employee training program, I'm gonna put a little marker out in case I need it, is, okay, so in this case, it's the needs assessment. This is by far and large, if you don't remember anything else about the training program, know the needs assessment is 1, the first step, and 2, the most important step with regards to training. The needs assessment is really what dictates, is all about trying to figure out what needs to be trained. If you don't know what needs to be trained, everything you do in towards of efforts later on in terms of the training, you might be training the wrong thing. You might be, if you do a really good job of training, but you're training the wrong thing, then your training program will be a bit of a waste. Okay. So the first step in designing the program is to figure out what you need to train. So that is the needs assessment. Program development comes after. Okay, so you're trying to develop the program that you've established based on the needs assessment. Course delivery is how on earth you're going, like, on the job training, classroom delivery, e-learning, those types of things. Again, you need to figure out what you're training in order for you to develop, to leverage certain courses or styles of methods of teaching. Program evaluation is the last step. Once you've done all this work, you got to evaluate it, and then training objective development. I think I just made that up. That doesn't really make any sense. So that's definitely not correct. How do I erase all this stuff? Okay. All right. Question 2. Dinesh is currently using new performance management software systems. We're talking about performance management. We're not talking about performance management. We're still talking about training, but we're throwing you off here. I might have included the wrong question here, which is designed to make it easier to digitally organize and manage performance data among all frontline staff members. Dinesh is inputting existing performance data into the software and learning how to sort and search for specific assessments. A trainer. Okay, fine. We got all this performance stuff. I was like, am I talking about performance management? I thought it was training. First, a trainer demonstrates how to do something, and then Dinesh repeats the action with the trainer observing and provides feedback. Which of the following statements more accurately describes what type of? So this is a form of a course delivery. It's a course delivery question. Essentially, we're painting a scenario up here, and then you're trying to identify what type of training is Dinesh doing. Okay. I guess the one challenging thing that I don't usually do, I'm kind of combining the concepts from 2 different chapters into the same question, I guess, to make things a little more complicated. So in this case, everything really before here, around performance management, it's a bit to throw you off. It's kind of describing the context, but it's really to throw you off. But the only important thing is the trainer demonstrates how to do something, right? So there's training going on. So trainer does an action, Dinesh repeats, trainer provides feedback. Okay, what is it? Well, it's on the job training. There's some type of, you're interacting with a trainer in real time, you're performing the work, there's back and forth going on. Whether you call this a trainer, whether you call this somebody more senior, an experienced employee, a mentor, those are all different, synonyms you could use, but it's the same kind of idea taking place. Off the job training, I don't think off the job training is really a thing. Right? I guess it's like, you're training and you're not actually working as off the job training, but that's not, this isn't a thing. This isn't a term we talk about. Is developing a training program? No, there is actually training something. So they're not developing the program. And then engaging in performance management. Again, all of that little nonsense up front could have thrown you off into thinking that it was something to do with performance management. And I'm not sure why compensation management is in here. Again, probably just to throw you guys off. Okay. So that's it. Those are the 2 questions related to training. Performance management. Let me move my face. Okay, for the first question. Just last week, an average nurse happened to save a patient's life. That's kind of nice. And so he is the nurse, biannual performance appraisal was full of praise, despite exhibiting average performance over the last year. This is an example of which of the following biases. Ooh, this is a good one. Okay, think about this one, okay? So a nurse happened to save somebody. So here's their performance over time. So this is time, okay? And their performance over time is here. And then right before here's the performance appraisal. And then their performance spiked right at the time of the performance appraisal. And then when they got their performance appraisal, it was clearly like super high. Okay, that is what we refer to as a recency effect, right? Let me just pull up this again. Sorry. So recency effect suggests that everything that happens just before the evaluation, you're going to be evaluating. You're going to prioritize or focus your attention on the activities and behaviors just before the evaluation, rather than like, come on, like if the majority of the time the nurse was here, they probably should have received an evaluation somewhere closer to here, maybe, and then acknowledged, saving somebody's life. But instead, the recency effect is focusing solely on the most recent activities and ignoring everything before then. Okay. In this case, it actually worked out positive for the nurse, but sometimes it could have been bad. Like imagine if time is here and somebody's performance here, and then somebody, does something right when the evaluation is going to occur. So it could be negative or positive. In this case, it seems to have helped out the nurse. All right. ACME Corporation has recently developed a new employment test for the prestigious role of Anvil Dentist Density Inspector. That's weird. The CEO, W.E. Coyote. Is this a spin? Did I make a spin on the Bugs and Tweety show? What is that? Was the Coyote and where's the Roadrunner? The Coyote has asked for the HR department to demonstrate the validity of the employment test. What data will the HR department likely use to satisfy the CEO's request? I got to read this again. I'm distracted by the Roadrunner. Okay, ACME Corporation has recently developed a new employment test for the prestigious role. Developed a new employment test for that role. The CEO has asked the HR department to demonstrate the validity of the employment test. So in order to demonstrate the validity of a test is saying that if you were to every time you do that test and you get the response, you're getting the response exactly what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so if I'm testing you on, I want to test your HR knowledge and I give you a geography exam, you're going to respond to the geography exam, but it's not going to give you anything related to HR. So that would be a very poor validity. However, if I give you like an OB exam, OB is closer than geography to HR. So the validity would be slightly better, but it's still bad. It's only if you get an HR exam, are the responses you're receiving from that exam going to be aligned with HR? So the validity of an HR exam would be stronger because I'm getting the content and the responses that I'm intending to get, okay? So let's see, what data will the HR department likely use to satisfy this request? So if we're trying to, of an employment test. So let's see, performance appraisal data. Demonstrate the validity. Let's see if I agree with this. Job, okay, so the validity of an employment test. Demonstrate the validity of the employment test. So a higher performing. So you're trying to look at somebody who's higher performing in a role, perhaps. Job evaluation is based on, so it wouldn't be that, because that's based on trying to determine the internal, the relative internal ranking of one job to another, right? So that's used for compensation. It wouldn't be used for performance. Job specification that's what we talked about at the beginning of the term. That was when you conduct job analysis, you're writing a job description, write job specification. So that's not really going to be required. We talked about compensation. We're not, this question doesn't ask about compensation. Job description data. Job description data is similar to job specification data. We're not asking about that. So the only thing that really kind of makes sense is this idea of performance appraisal data. The only challenging thing in here is that there is actually no reference to performance appraisal. So the big clue or cue that you would use is the idea that you're trying to establish or identify or demonstrate the validity of a particular form of employment. Okay, and that validity is you're trying to collect the validity of the employment test. Okay, compensation. I didn't really like that last question, I have to admit. All right, compensation. To determine a fair rate of compensation, most firms rely on, a fill in the blank. These are always fun, which discover what other employers in the same labor market are paying for specific key jobs. Determine, okay. I would, if I was explaining this in class, I would actually use a different answer than on here. Okay, but when you're trying to figure out a fair rate of compensation, you know how much somebody is paid inside your organization. You want to make sure that same job, I don't know why, the circle is supposed to be organizations. Here, these little lines are jobs. Okay, there we go. You want to make sure that that job is paid equivalent to that job in another organization. Similar here, because if say the competitors' pay is higher for the same job, then people are going to leave your organization, go to somebody else's organization, okay? So firms rely on market data, okay, is how I would describe it, okay? Now, market data is not anywhere in these questions, so you have to try to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense? If you're going to be relying on other people's data, so people from other organizations, what's a good way to get that data, okay? Job grading, no, is it because job grading is all about the idea of trying to establish, kind of like job evaluation, you're trying to establish the grade or the value of jobs within your organization. Okay, we'll skip over wage curves for now. Compensation philosophies, this is how you're paying people. Okay, like the overall approach. Is it paid for performance? Is it paid based on like seniority, things like that? Skill, knowledge-based pay rates. Okay, so this is, this is kind of like talking about, while you're trying to figure out a fair rate, while you can pay people by skills or knowledge. So it doesn't really establish what firms rely on in employment audits. Just no. Wage and salary surveys are what some organizations do when market data doesn't exist. Okay, so market data refers to this idea of, so say the circle is your competitor. Well, there's going to be lots of competitors and lots of other organizations, okay? Market data refers to the idea that there's some other organization up here where its job is to collect all of this data, Okay, and then you're actually just going to this third-party organization to buy data that is collected from everybody else. When that doesn't exist, what you would do is you would actually go seek out specific organizations and say, hey, can you fill out my survey that tells you how much you pay, this particular unique role? Okay, so you might actually be working with your competitor to figure out how much they're paying, to figure out how much your three biggest competitors are paying, and you almost form a bit of a partnership. That's a loose term, partnership for like this one particular event to say, okay, for our very unique job A, we pay them 75,000. For our very unique job B, we pay them 85,000. Okay, so then everybody's kind of aware of what everybody's paying one another, okay? And that can help you establish a fair compensation within your own organization. All right, the second question. Ocean Airlines has recently seen a very large number of voluntary turnover among flight attendants in a short period of time. Voluntary turnover is when they choose to leave the organization. You're not terminating anybody, they're choosing to leave the organization. The company has almost reached a point where flights have to be canceled. Wow, a lot of people are leaving, as there are not enough staff to operate the flights, even with extensive overtime. Reviewing exits interviews, you see the following statements from a former, I'm quitting to take a job at another. They're offering me a lot more money. Okay. So in my previous example, it's very important that you look at other, market data or other organizations pay, because if somebody's paying you more than you, you're going to leave, which is exactly the case taking place in this organization. Okay, the second interview is they're just not paying enough. Okay, so I think it's pretty clear. So this airlines appears to be struggling with which of the following issues? Is it internal equity? Well, the question isn't really talking about how much each person's, the pay issues associated with each person. No. Is it talking about external equity? Well, external equity is talking about the idea that, you have an issue outside of your organization, right? Which is kind of what's going on here. Somebody else is paying more, so that kind of makes sense. Job ranking, well, again, we're not looking, this is an internal thing, can't get there. And job analysis, an internal thing as well. So that doesn't really make sense, okay? So the only thing that even talked about anything external or what the market's paying is external equity, okay? So that's the correct answer. Benefits. Okay, the benefit, first question, the benefit that would provide a long-term smoker the most value is, what are these smokers? How many people are smokers, okay? Well, let's take a look, okay? Health insurance, yes, because you're going to need healthcare and you want to be covered for all those drugs and special treatments you need. So health insurance is the one. Is it pension plans? No, pension plans are all about the idea of retirement. So maybe, a pension plan is how much money you're going to receive from the pension plan upon retirement. So if you retire at 60, you retire at 65, you're going to get a lump sum amount of money per month or per year until you die. Sabbatical is time away from work, right? So it could be 5 months, 6 months. Typically, sabbatical is a year. In universities, professors get their sabbaticals are paid. Most commonly in organizations, sabbaticals are unpaid. However, your job is protected. Workers' comp. Workers' comp is when you get injured on the job. Doing the job, you can stay home and you still get your regular pay, or you have to go to, I guess it's not really workers' comp, but in other situations, if you're injured on the job and you can work in a different job that, the example I use in class is, say a cop's running after a bad guy, trips, breaks his ankle. Again, he or she cannot be in the field chasing more bad guys with a broken ankle. So they might take up an office job until their ankle's recovered. Again, they would receive the same pay, the same benefits, no representation of demotion or anything along those lines. That's not workers' compensation, but it could be an alternative method, like a reasonable accommodation. Gym memberships, Yeah, I guess if you have bad lungs, you need to work out other parts of your body. No, that's just no, they're probably not. If they're smoking, they're probably not interested in their health to begin with. Okay, so that's not the most. That doesn't make the most sense. So health insurance is definitely the right answer. Which of the following is a statutory benefit mandated by law in Canada? Okay, so statutory. First, the idea of like mandatory. Yeah, you have to do this. One thing that's kind of nice, I think it's kind of nice, more challenging for students, is when professors pick the exact same options, right, for a question. Not to say that it's going to help you out at all, recognizing that, but look for it if professors don't, and sometimes they'll swap one answer out for, for another answer or something like that. That might give you a clue as to what the correct answer is. I'm not saying it always is, but it could be for junior professors. More seasoned professors would keep the same options to remove that level of clueness, right? Giving you hints. Anyways, which of the following is a mandatory benefit is a statutory benefit mandated by law in Canada? So the workers' comp is the only one. Sabbaticals, you don't have to. If you want to take off 5 months, organization might say, okay, see ya, you're not coming back, right? Pension plans, very few. I think there's only like 20% of jobs in Canada actually have pensions. Health insurance, there's some. I guess things are changing. I guess dental plans and things are becoming more common for all employees, but no. Gym memberships, you definitely don't have to offer your employees a gym membership. Workers' comp is something that is mandatory. Right? It's a statutory benefit that all organizations have to provide. Employee relations. Okay, so this is, in this class, we talked about communication, dismissal, downsizing, layoffs, terminations, what's turnover, all that stuff kind of is all squished into this particular chapter. Okay, so which disciplinary action is considered the most severe and is typically used as a last resort for addressing serious misconduct? Okay, so one thing you could do, unless one of them jumps out to you, you could think of the waterfall that we talked about in terms of progressive discipline. Now this question doesn't actually list progressive discipline, but progressive discipline is all about the idea of trying to escalate the discipline or escalate the response or discipline in order to try to correct somebody's action. So it escalated from a verbal warning to a written warning to a second written warning to a suspension to a termination. Okay. So in this case, consistent with that approach is the termination. Verbal warning is more minor. Written warning is more minor. Demotion is illegal because that could lead to constructive dismissal, right? Which it just happens to be the next question. Performance improvement plan is something that organizations will implement to ensure that you are meeting your required tasks and activities. And usually it's an indication that management is not happy with you because they're putting an additional plan in place to make sure that you're performing as you should. If you do not satisfy this plan, and that is additional evidence that could contribute to your suspension or termination, or continuing to go up that progressive disciplinary chart. Okay, what is constructive dismissal? So constructive dismissal, we talked about this in class, right? Without me looking at the answers, constructive dismissal, it was about the idea of how do you reduce the prestige, you're changing working conditions in such a way that you're reducing prestige, you're adding more work, you're not paying somebody more. You're basically trying to make an ugly scenario for somebody that would promote them or push them to leave the organization under their own accord, and it is against the rules. Okay, all right, against the rules, against the law. Okay, so let's see. So that if that's my description of it, let's see what these guys say. Dismissal due to employee misconduct, no. Right? You're trying to change the working conditions. Dismissal during a probationary period. I should note that you are allowed to remove somebody during a probationary period without any real rationale and is not considered constructive dismissal. Okay, so constructive dismissal, that is a little nuance I forgot to describe. So constructive dismissal has to occur after a probationary period if a job has a probationary period. Employee resigns due to hostile work environment created by employer. This is a very likely scenario. Again, employer creates an ugly work environment that pushes somebody out the door. Mutual agreement. The mutual agreement to terminate an employee. No. Constructive dismissal is all about not a mutual agreement. Temporary suspension from work. No, that's none of those. Okay. So there you go. The employee resigns due to hostile work environment. Okay. Last chapter that we're going to be talking about. We're 26 minutes in. So we'll finish this within 30 minutes. All right. Which of the following is not a technique used for dealing with substance abuse? Okay. So a couple nuances here. This course looks at HR exclusively in Canada. There are other rules, other laws in different countries. For example, Canada and the US is very similar for a lot of things. This is one of these scenarios that it is very different. Okay. So we're looking at substance abuse within Canada. Okay, so which of the following is not a technique? I'm just going to pop this up here. So there was actually one slide in my slide deck that talked about this very specifically. In Canada, we cannot do random drug testing. Okay, no. When there is an assumption, an expectation that drugs were involved, what can you do? You can discipline. Written warning, verbal warning, suspension, all of those kind of things. Again, building evidence before you get to the higher levels of suspension and termination. Discharge could eventually be termination could eventually be one that you put in. In-house counseling, okay, refer somebody for help inside the organization, refer somebody for help outside the organization. You can do all those things. You cannot do random drug testing. There are a few different types of drug testing you can do. It can be scheduled. It can be after a major incident. So say you're a pilot and the plane goes down randomly. While you could say, hey, were drugs, a part of this in any? So after a major incident or something of that nature. Okay, but not just, hey, it's a Tuesday morning. Randomly, we're gonna just test out our employees. Okay. All right. The bottom question: which of the following is not a reason why younger workers tend to experience more workplace injuries than older workers? Okay. So this question is like you have to read the question a few times because it is a little tricky. Okay, from a wording perspective. Okay, so this is the type of question you have to read carefully. It's not actually testing your knowledge; it's testing your ability to read. Okay, so which of the following is not? Okay, a reason why younger workers tend to experience more workplace injuries. So it's saying most of these are reasons why younger workers would experience more injuries. Which of them does not fit align with that? Okay. Okay, so let's try to identify all of the options as to why they would increase, why younger folks are more likely to get injured on the job than older. They're less experienced and they lack training. Yes, right? Younger people don't have as much experience. That makes sense. If you don't have as much experience, you might mess up. A sense of youthful invincibility. Yes, younger people. I remember when I was 25, I was like, I could take on the world. I was like Superman. I was doing all sorts of dumb stuff and thinking that nothing could hurt me. And then I rolled my car. And then I was like, I'm no longer a hero. I'm going to drive like a grandpa. Willingness to ask questions. Ooh, so this pops out as the answer. Younger workers have an unwillingness to ask questions. If you're asking questions, you're more likely to learn and gain experience and all sorts of those things, which are likely to lead to less accidents. Younger workers are less willing to ask questions. I'm not sure what it is. I think for me, when I was a really young worker, I still feel like I'm young, even though I'm not getting that young I'm not getting any younger. But for me, when I was just out of my undergrad, I didn't want to ask questions because I didn't want people to realize that I didn't know what I was talking about. But newsflash, people still know that you don't know what you're talking about. Whether you ask them a question or not, they still know, right? The only thing that they learn is if you don't ask them a question, they think one, you don't know what you're talking about, and two, you don't even have the insight to know that you don't know what you're talking about. At least when you're asking a question, it shows that you don't know what you're talking about, right? Okay. Younger workers are asked to do more dangerous jobs. Yes, that contributes to more likely to be injured on the job. Younger workers tend to be asked to do more dangerous jobs. They're typically more physically fit, so they're more likely to lift this heavy object than another one. As well, older workers may avoid dangerous jobs just because, well, they don't want to get injured. So they're going to be like, oh, we'll give it to the new kid, right? That kind of it. A lack of preparation for the workplace. Yeah, perhaps they have other, if we're talking about younger workers, maybe somebody who's just out of school, maybe somebody who's got kids, they got other demands, things are busy running around, so they're not as prepared to, I don't know, not as prepared for the workplace, and they might get injured on the job, something along those lines. Anyways, guys, that is it. 31 minutes is what it took for you to review last year's exam. I hope you found this helpful. Again, remember, 6 chapters. Go through my other videos. There's a whole bunch of good content on there, good questions. You might find one on the exam. You never know. I don't do that. But there is a lot of similarities between them. So good, go through it, enjoy, and I'll see you guys on July 27th.